Hello and welcome to Forever Blues, your go-to podcast for all things Birmingham City with me, Neil Moxley, and my co-host Colin Tattum. And just before we get underway, the usual bit of housekeeping, our grateful thanks to Davies Law for sponsoring this podcast. Well, we're speaking to you on the back of Carabao Cup defeat by Port Vale on Tuesday night. Plenty of changes, plenty to talk about with Colin and myself. And the first question really is that a cause for concern, Col?
What crisis? What crisis?
That's the one.
First defeat of the season, obviously, very disappointing. It wasn't Blues as we've seen this season so far, was it? And I think, were the mitigating circumstances? Well, obviously, yes. 10 changes to the starting lineup, 3 players in for their debut. And also, let's not forget that Alphonse Samsted, who came in, Marvin, Ducksch, and Kanya Fujimoto have not played any minutes.
No.
Fujimoto has had an hour for the 21s, but the others haven't. And when you are starting a team like that, it's always going to be quite difficult. So it was fairly disjointed a little. There was uncoordinated. They didn't play with that usual familiarity. Which is understandable. Again, it's not making excuses for the team, because obviously you would have expected Blues to have beaten Port Vale, and for individually and collectively for them to have played better. But there are reasons there. So in terms of, was it a concern? I'd say a concern in so much that they shouldn't really have lost that game. They should, with the players that they had out there, they should have got through into the third round. But you can understand the circumstances and what transpired. Even when Chris Davies decided to throw on the, if you want to, for want of a better phrase, his big guns for the second half, they just didn't click or fire either. So like you said, I think it was just quite disjointed. There was no rhythm to it throughout. And you also have to look at Port Vale. I thought they were very organised, well organised. They were good out of possession. And where they gave Blues a bit of the heebie-jeebies was the set pieces. That little spell just before the goal came, Blues, struggled to cope with it a little bit, and which was unusual. But again, that they're missing the nucleus of their team, the spine of the players that have played regularly. Fair play to Port Vale. They deserved it on the night. They were very competitive and aggressive. It was a disappointment for Blues. But the league is the be all and end all, isn't it? This season, the quest to get into the Premier League ASAP. So I think it's just a case of dusting down and then looking ahead to Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, how much do you think Chris Davies' selection was influenced by the fact that he's obviously got, he's gone Saturday, Tuesday, Friday. It's 3 games in 7 days. How much do you think it influenced him?
Yeah, undoubtedly. For the previous round against Sheffield United, he made 6 changes. This is 10 changes, a new team in effect. And obviously he needs to get minutes into the legs of some of the new guys that we've not seen yet, Lewis Koumas as well. I think had the Leicester game been on Saturday, it might have been a bit different. And I don't think he wanted to use the likes of Stansfield and Paik if he could have helped it. And obviously there were certain players who just didn't, who got a rest, who got their feet up completely, which tells you again, the game on Friday night is a big one going into the international break. Obviously you were there as well, Mark. What did you think of the new guys, the debutants?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that, again, it's really difficult to tell to make snap judgments just on, one thrown together side. I think, I'm not going to say this very often about Chris Davies' team, but it didn't look like a Chris Davies team. Normally they know what they're doing. They know there's a pattern of play. We might touch on that in a bit, but I just thought that this lot didn't, for obvious reasons. I didn't understand why there was the 2 big guys played up front. I didn't quite understand, where the sort of structure was in midfield. I just thought it was, just a bit of a mess, really, Cole, to be honest with you. And I'm not saying that's anybody's fault. I understand the pressure that Chris Davies is under. And I think the most telling comment after his post-match press conference was probably his last one. He basically said, You know, how am I going to know whether these guys are good enough to play for Birmingham City in the league and the Championship if I've never seen them play a competitive game, or if I never put them on the pitch? And I think that there is a huge amount of I think that's basically his sort of defence mechanism against any player that knocks on his door and says, "Gaffer, you've not given me a try," and he'll go, "Well, I did give you a try, and unfortunately, you know, I felt you came up short in the game against Port Vale." You know, that people can't then moan. You know, they can moan about the fact they've not had a lot of preparation. They can moan about it, but they can't actually moan about the fact they've not been given a go. And I think that, you know, it's sad because, you know, in your prep notes for this, you mentioned it was the 11th successive season that we've not got past the third round, and I think that's a real shame for any sort of decent sized Championship club, really, to be honest, to use it as some sort of testing ground. I mean, just throwing it back at you, Cole, how do you think that? I mean, for me, Lewis Koumas stuck out. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think the manager said that afterwards as well. He liked what he saw from Lewis Koumas, and again, I think you could see that the qualities that he's got and why he decided to bring him in. He's very much a front foot player. He's busy, lively, quite quick and aggressive. So he did sort of stand out in terms of the new guys, definitely. And having a whole season at Stoke City playing the Championship, that's got to stand him in good stead for Blues as well, having that experience behind him. And again, he was finding his feet in a completely new team, a new system, new teammates. And there weren't the combinations there, you know, that there was no real understanding, which you'd expect. If that 11 had played 3 games in a row, you'd see a different outcome, I'm sure of it. But these were the circumstances of the night. These were the circumstances.
Sorry, mate, just quickly, just to interject, Chris Davies made the point afterwards that Lewis Koumas had a full pre-season with Liverpool, and I think we saw that, didn't we? Because he looked sharp, didn't he? He looked like he was on, like you said, he looked like he was on the front foot, and he looked like he wanted to have a go the minute he got on the ball.
Yeah, and that leads me on nicely with Marvin Ducksch, that he got injured for Werder Bremen, and so he's had, you know, no real competitive action to sharpen himself up, and literally he was just sort of like almost feeling his way on the night. He's an interesting one, because I don't think he's a number 9. I don't think he's a number 10. He's a big body shape, and his layoffs were quick and sharp. Yeah. You can see that he spots a pass quite quickly.
Yes.
And I think his first touch game was, you know, probably again if he'd have played a lot more and built up understandings with people around him, I think it would have been a lot slicker. But you could see signs of promise there, couldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, when I spoke to a couple of the recruitment bods about him, when it was clear he was coming in, they made the point that, like, I'm not saying Marvin Ducksch he's like Harry Kane, which is quite frankly a ridiculous comparison. But what they said he did do really well. What they picked up, obviously in the research videos that they'd seen, was the fact he does like to drop deep. He does like to come off his markers and link up play. And now you've got the likes of Koumas and Gray in particular, who've got a real turn of speed. You can see that benefits in Blues. You can understand the thought process behind the signing, can't you? So to answer the question about what he is, that's what I think Blues are. I don't know what he is, but I think that's why Blues brought him in. It may be, particularly away from home, when you get the chance to counter, that he's like the ability to get people up the pitch quickly, and Blues can do that because we've seen them do that against Blackburn. You know, that might play a part. I mean, what did you think about Fujimoto?
Yeah, again, an interesting one. He's possibly more at home playing as a 10 centrally. I thought he looked a little bit lost, maybe. But again, he's been thrown into it. New environment, new team. The expectations are there. So he was getting used to what Chris Davies wants as well, and obviously that right-hand side role is quite particular, that he likes that player to come inside, really. So you can see he showed flashes. He's obviously good technically, but again, I think it will take him a while to get up to speed and to get on this sort of same wavelength for what the manager wants and what his teammates around him alike as well.
Yeah, just want to come back to the cause for concern thing. Did you think that the fact that Port Vale put us under so much pressure towards the end of that first half, do you think our inability to deal with this, and Darren Moore actually referenced it afterwards, I don't know whether you saw his comments, but he basically said there was an edginess in the crowd. They'd seen what I'd probably done with the first couple, and then every time, we sort of went up for a set piece, he said we could sense the edginess in the crowd, that they thought that Blues were struggling to deal with it. Do you think that's a cause for concern, or do you think it's one of those because Christophe Clara wasn't there?
Yeah, I think it was more of the moment, because Oxford United are very strong at set pieces, the likes of Michael Heelick, and we dealt with Oxford United's set piece threat, corners, etc. very well. I think it was just on the night of the moment,
Right.
And obviously the back four had changed as well, and the goal came from a second phase of play. And that's what can happen. As I said, Blues got a bit jittery. They had that little spell, but that doesn't mean that there's an Achilles heel there. I don't think so. You mentioned there, you take Christophe Clara out of the equation there as well. You've got a big body, a leader who gets his nut on the end of things as well. But yeah, it was just one of those nights. Port Vale, they'd not won in the league, but there was nothing to lose for them. And once they got ahead, they had something to fight for and hold on to. And like I said, they were organised, very aggressive out of possession. And they didn't have to come out their shell second half. It was just a case of, well, let's see if we can see this through, which in the end they did, because Blues, just could not sort of find that real clear-cut opening to get on level terms.
Yeah, I spoke to Michael Bagley, the Port Vale reporter, before the start, and said, how's it shaping up, Mike? And he said, we've made 7 changes. And I said, Blues have made 10. And he sort of said, we're struggling for a bit of strike power, for a bit of, cutting edge. We just sold our striker to Plymouth. So when they got, it's like professional football teams know if they're struggling for goals, they tend to know it. And I wasn't surprised in the slightest that Blues found them really difficult. It's like throw a starving man a piece of meat and he'll chew it up quite quick, won't it? Or starving dog rather, whatever, starving somebody. So I wasn't surprised really that they managed to mount a rear guard action, because one thing that football teams are at that level is they're well organised. Do you know what I mean? And Darren Moore is he's a respected coach. He's been there, seen it and done it now. He's got quite a few games under his belt, with West Brom and Sheffield Wednesday, both at League One level and Championship level. And he would have known the importance of, getting that one over the line.
What I found interesting as well, Mox, was Marc Leonard being given the captain's armband. That was an interesting call from Chris Davies, and I think that was probably gave Leonard quite a little bit of a fillip as well. And I think he said afterwards, it was, genuinely felt it was a privilege and an honour. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it was strange. I mean, I didn't say, I haven't seen anything in Leonard's performances so far that I've seen. I think he's a decent player, by the way, to warrant the fact that he would have been tossed the captain's armband. But clearly, Chris Davies either sees enough in him to think that he's got some leadership qualities. I do think, one of the things I would say is I'm not exactly sure we were over blessed with leaders last night. When you take Clara out of the equation, where are they? Do you know what I mean? If Marc Leonard doesn't strike me as a natural second in command or whatever, where are the others? Now I know obviously the likes of Ethan Laird, a big character, the likes of Iwata weren't playing yesterday, but and again, I mean, I have to say, I thought James Beadle did very well, particularly towards the end of the first half. And Ryan Allsop's a big voice in that dressing room as well, don't forget. So perhaps, you've taken out Allsop, you've taken out Clara, you've taken out Iwata.
Yeah, I think with Leonard as well, he was, of the starters, he was around last season and played a fair few games. So he's like the manager's voice. He would, I'm assuming Chris Davies would have looked to him to sort of set an example, because he knows how the manager wants him to play, and he's putting a lot of trust in him.
Yeah.
And fair play, because you go through that team, probably Taylor Gardner Hickman, but of the rest, you can understand why he got the armband.
Yeah. I mean, do you think? I mean, we had George Hall, for instance, on the bench. Is there a case there for could he have changed it up a little bit? Do you think with
possibly? I mean, you got George Hall and Daniel Ishiki. Sorry, Dan, I can never get your name right. He's getting his first involvement. Both wide players, and Daniel can come in from the left. So, if we with one down with 20 to go, could have thrown them on.
Strange one, because we've taken off the two big blokes, haven't we?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
you know, like I said, it was just one of those nights where things, whatever was tried, wasn't going for us. But maybe we're talking about a lot here, and maybe we're as guilty as a lot of the fan. There was quite a bit of a reaction, possibly a lot of an overreaction to a first defeat of the season. And when we've seen what this team, as a group of players, as a squad, a collective, what it's about. So, but again, I suppose that's down to the raising of the standards and the expectation, isn't it? With that comes pressure.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously talking ahead of the Leicester game. Recap very quickly what happened at the weekend against Oxford. What was your big takeaway from that one?
It was interesting because we saw it in the cup game as well, that the tactical timeout midway through the first half, whereas last season it was every other goalkeeper from the opposition seemingly going down with an injury. We had it against Oxford and Port Vale.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. Ryan Allsop went down 22, 23 minutes.
Yeah.
Chris Davies got the players together and tweaked it a little bit tactically. And after that, we got real control of the game against Oxford, pushed on against them a little bit more, and also baited them, to come onto them with their press. And that it helped change the game, that little break. I don't like them because it's crept into football too much now, and it just breaks up the flow of the game. You're going into a basketball scenario of 4 quarters, which I don't like. But for Blues, it worked against Oxford, and I felt from there on they were in control of that game. Should have probably got a couple more goals ahead to make it easier in the second half. And interesting what Gary Rowett said afterwards. He mentioned, he said, well, you have to accept that this is an exceptional team. They're really good at keeping the ball.
Yeah.
And they make you work. They move you around, and then they find the gaps.
Yeah.
It's once they've found the gaps, can Blues be a bit more boomph, killer?
Yeah.
But again, that's a work in progress in many respects. And that's flipping it back to Port Vale. That was the disappointment, whereby Blues didn't keep the ball as well as we know they can.
No.
Didn't find those gaps as well as we know they can. But that was just one of those nights. But Oxford was a very, I'd say, very controlling performance by Blues, and it was very much a game that we saw last season in League One, whereby the opposition were fairly conservative, but Blues also took away what they're good at and controlled the game to their liking. Yeah,
it kind of panned out the way a lot of people thought it would before the kick-off, really, didn't it? In terms of Blues having plenty of possession, and Oxford, trying to make the most of what they had. I mean, how would you assess the first 3 games off the back of that? I know we're speaking ahead of Leicester on Friday.
I think Blues can be very pleased, and I think they've had different challenges to face in those 3 games, and also teams that have been in the Premier League or just, and also in the cup game, Sheffield United just failed in the playoffs. And I think they can be very pleased. And what I like is that Blues have not changed their modus operandi. We have carried on playing as they did last season, and it's almost, this is what we are, this is our identity. And teams have had to sort of cope with that and counter that. Whereas, as we've seen over the last few years at this level, Blues have been very much a sort of low block, hope for the best, sort of counter-attacking. Oh dear, we're 1 down. Mark Roberts will have to launch it into the box, for the last 5 minutes type of team. So I think Blues can be very pleased with the start to life back in the Championship, and I think they are clearly have already got the respect of their peers.
Okay. Well, that just about wraps it up for this episode of Forever Blues. We've looked back on the Port Vale game and Oxford, and the next one we'll be bringing you is a look ahead to the Leicester City game. Just before we go, just because it's lovely, this is going to be given out to our one of our subscribers. When we reach the 1,000 subscribers mark, we're already up to 600. Thank you ever so much for taking the trouble to do that. It means a lot to us. But when we get to 1,000, we've got 3 or 4 of these little bad boys. And I've tried this one, 45% proof. You won't be surprised to learn I liked it a lot. But anyway, look, thanks ever so much for joining us. Click the like, follow and subscribe buttons. And a big shout out again to Davies Law for sponsoring us. Bewdley Spirits, as I've just seen. AMG Logistics, Drain Tech. Thank you ever so much indeed for joining us.